Now, the current Gladiator Circuit meta is crit me with your best shot, and it is by far my favorite meta so far. However, there are some defenders in this meta that make this node insanely annoying, and it just becomes the opposite of fun. It becomes absolutely miserable when these guys pop up. So who are these champions and what are their counters? Well, let's find that out right now. So first up is Manthing, and this guy, in my opinion, is by far the hardest defender in this meta. He is just the worst to deal with, and it is because his mechanic where your champions do not deal extra crit damage against him makes him just a total pain. So how do you deal with this guy? Well, I think the best option is just the ban button. I really think it comes down to that, because if you don't have Manthing and the opponent does, you will just pretty much lose that battle. However, if you have Manthing and you want to like maintain him, then here is your solution. Your solution is to either tough it out with a poison immune champion, like he can be taken with any poison immune, but it will just be a very long fight, or you can use a champion that has a passive fury, or not a passive fury, but just a fury in general, because this gives you a massive attack rating, and attack rating is the way to go for this fight, because Manthing reduces crit damage, not attack rating. So champions like Titania, like Hulk, who are both buff immune or poison immune, are your best counters by far for Manthing. Then there's some other ones like the Overseer, who also benefits pretty well against this fight. There are champions like Namor, who can do it with a ton of luck because he has a massive passive fury. There's champions like Mcoc, who can just burst him down pretty fast. Kingpin might work. There might be some other science champions that can do it, but all in all, there are few options for this guy. So I feel like the best thing to do is just ban him if you don't have him. So who are y'all using though for this guy? I would love to know, because he is by far the biggest annoyance for me. Now, Ebony Maw is going to be a 7-star champion, and he might, you know, get picked a ton. So he'll have his own video coming out soon, but for now, here's a brief example of what to do against him. So for Ebony Maw here, the biggest thing is that he misses all guaranteed crits from non-science champions. So your best solution is just a science champion. Anyone will work because they cannot miss on their guaranteed crits, so he becomes a lot easier to fight. And the best options here are just Titania, Silk, anyone that is science. And for example, we have the Silk fight, and Silk just makes this guy a joke and a half. Here we have the fight start, we go in, we get the intercept, we are not missing because we are a science champion. We go back in, we drop the SP1, and the fight is over in about 13 seconds there. And that's why Ebony Maw isn't the toughest guy out there, because against a science character just becomes a big joke. However, there is another solution here, and it is just not intercepting, because the intercept gives you the guaranteed crits. So if you don't intercept, you don't get the guaranteed crits, so it makes Maw a much easier time. And for example, here we have this Warlock fight. This was done in about 63 seconds because you don't have guaranteed crits, so you won't get all your damage output, right? So it becomes a bit of a longer fight. But Warlock still does great here. But keep in mind, it is still Maw. Maw still has a ton of annoying abilities. For example, his Falter, his SP1 Fury buff that he can nullify and just degen you with. So just have a science champion, have a good Maw counter in general, and then you'll just be pretty much fine. Now we have the harder version of Maw with Nova, because with Nova, no one can bypass his guaranteed crit stuff, not even Mystic characters. And what his does is, whenever you hit him, if it's a guaranteed crit, you have minus 75% attack rating. And also he gets just massive Nova charges too. So it is very annoying to deal with, and your only solution is to just not intercept and ideally use high crit rate champs. For example, CGR, Hercules, or there is this option. And this option isn't the safest for sure, but if it lines up, then it is pretty good. So the option here is just playing it like a regular fight and just not relying on high crit rate or just intercepting, just playing him normally and just hope to crit a ton, which Gambit here, I get a bit lucky for sure, and sometimes you will too, right? So he can be done with anyone, but it will just be a very long fight, and if you accidentally intercept, then you will just be in a ton of trouble. But here I can just build up my charges, I can drop my heavy attack, then I drop the SP2, and I get a massive crit there that, you know what, shouldn't happen all the time, but if it does happen, hey, that's pretty awesome, right? So high damage characters that can just rely on a crit, for example, Gambit here or Sunspot. Name more. There are some options, but just keep in mind there is a lot of luck to it, and for a safer option, use champions that have precisions of any sort. And yeah, Nova is pretty annoying, but Mr. Sinister just right up there, to be honest, because without the proper counter, he is literally impossible to fight. Just impossible straight up, because what he does is he regens 75% of all damage done from crits, and this isn't just guaranteed crits, this is every crit. So you need heal block, you need despair, you need something that can just block his healing out to counter this guy and just be able to do the fight in the first place. So for example, here we have Warlock, and Warlock in my opinion is the best option for this guy because his heal block is so strong, and his damage output in this meta is also just crazy strong because his crit damage is the highest in the game. So it is pretty awesome, and check this out. The damage output is great. He is now heal blocked, so there is no worries there. I dropped the SP2 and the fight is now over. And that's how Mr. Sinister can be a pretty big joke, but keep in mind that without a counter, he is impossible to take. Just straight up impossible to take. So Warlock, Omega Sentinel, Lady Deathstrike, Photon even, I've done it with her before too, Silk, just any champ who can block out healing. And last but not least is Electro, and Electro is a massive pain here because you cannot deal damage to him besides a crit. And if your characters do not have non-contact hits, then you will just take a ton of damage back. But like I said, non-contact hits are the way to go for this guy. So champions like Gambit, Nova, Baron Zemo, or just any ability accuracy reduction, so Falcon for example, can take this fight pretty well, but without it, he is just gonna deal a ton of damage to you. And with health being really important now with the time changes, or the score changes, sorry, he is a pretty big deal in this meta, so keep that in mind. So make sure to have at least 2 counters to him in your deck, or even 3, just make sure to have some at least, because without one, he is just a guaranteed loss. And now for some extras. So first up is Havoc, where whenever you crit him, he gains a plasma charge, and with guaranteed crits, he gains a ton of these charges, so be sure to have a Havoc counter of sorts. For example, there is Warlock, there is Omega Sentinel, there is Lady Deathstrike. You have a few options, but just be sure that you have at least one of them in your deck, because if you don't, then he is pretty much a guaranteed loss. And Nick Fury is just silly because he doesn't take any second life degen damage, which means he pretty much has 2 health pools. And that is just really wild, right? So your best option here is to just use a pretty strong DPS, for example, Storm or Sunspot, or just use a champion that just shuts down his second life, for example, Danny Moonstar or Toad. So yeah, overall, these defenders are just truly annoying for this meta, but at least they have some counters, right? But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this video. Who do you think is the best defender here? And yeah, that's about it for me.